Welcome to week 15 notes. This is compound inequalities. There are two types of compound inequalities, and inequalities and or inequalities. And they look like the following. This is just an example that you can write down. They can look like that with three parts right here. 1, 2, 3, and two inequality signs. Notice this is less than or equal to, this is just less than. They can look like this. And there's a variable in between. It can also look like this. K is less than -7, or K is greater than 6. So we have two different ones here. We have this type and we have this type. Guess which one is and, guess which one is or. If you guess this one is or, you are correct. Let me draw for you what the graph of an the graph of an and inequality looks like. I'll draw the graph of an or in just a second. So an and graph looks a little bit like this. I mean, it can kind of take different forms, but looks kind of like a barbell. If you've ever been to a gym or seen gym equipment like this, kind of like you hold part of it and you have a weight on one side and a weight on the other. Well, that's what and graphs look like. And you can have both of them solid on the end right there, both of the weights solid, both of the weights hollow. You could have one solid and one hollow. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but this is what and graphs look like when you graph them on the number line. Or graphs look kind of like this. If you have a solid dot, you have an arrow there, and then maybe you have another solid dot, and then arrow goes that way. So what you have in this case is kind of, a level ground and then a big gap, a chasm that you can fall into. And then you can also have an open circle in both or just in one. It doesn't really matter, but these are or graphs, both arrows going in the opposite direction, just so you can get an idea of what the graph looks like. Now, rules for open versus closed circles are the same as before. So what does that mean? That means that if you have this and that, you have that was supposed to be an arrow. You have a closed circle. If you have less than or greater than, that is going to be an open circle. Okay. And you can pause as much as you need to write all this stuff down. Before graphing, and inequalities should look something like smaller number. Okay, by the way, we are talking about and, so just put your mind in the frame of and right now. But we have smaller number is less than, the variable is less than large number. You could also have less than or equal to. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. It is still an and graph. So an example would be example 1. Look at this. We have -2 is less than x is less than 3. And the graph of this and inequality looks like this on our number line. Actually, let me get a different color. So we have our number line. And we have two numbers on this inequality. We have one at -2, one at 3. So you'll put two numbers on your graph. So go do that. And then can you guess what this graph is going to look like based on what I've told you up here already, what the and graphs look like and what the or graphs look like? Well, I'm telling you that this is an and graph. We have one number here, one number there. So we're going to have either an open or a closed circle. What do you think by looking at this? And if you said open, you are correct, because it is less than, not less than or equal to. So I have an open between -2 and x, so right there, and then between x and 3. So I'm going to have open circles on both -2 and 3 because it's not this, but it's just less than. Now, all I have to do is fill in this gap right here with my barbell handle. Okay, and this distance right here represents x, represents what x is. So this is the algebraic form of it, meaning just the equation or the inequality, and then this is the graph of that inequality. Let's look at another example. I'm going to take this one right up here, which is an and inequality, and I'm going to write it down and graph it. So I've copied it. I'm drawing my number line. I have both numbers. I have the -3 and the 5 right here. Remember that and inequalities have three parts. 1, 2, 3, and they're separated by the less than or equal to symbols. So -3 here, 5 here, and we have a closed circle here at -3, right? Because of the less than or equal to, and then we have an open circle here between the x and the 5 because it's just less than. And then we have to close up our gap right there neatly. As neatly as we can. Okay? Even though that wasn't very neat. But you get the picture. And that is an and graph. Now I want you to look very carefully at example 1 above, right here. You must see that it has three parts. Okay? One part where -2 is, that's right there, this part, okay? You have another part where x is, right there, and then you have a third part where 3 is. And I tried to color code it so you can see the three parts. Okay, now -2 isn't a part, it's just what's in the first part. Okay, but you always have the variable in the middle. Now, do you see this? It's critical that you see this before we move on. Yes? Good. Here we go. All three of these parts must be treated exactly the same. Okay, so for example, if I subtracted 3 from one part, I have to subtract 3 from the other two parts as well. And it's very similar to how you would treat both sides of an equation, right? Whatever we do to one side of the equation, we have to do to the other side of the equation. So for these, you want to get the variable by itself in the middle part, just like we have here. This is what we want, the variable by itself in the middle. So let's look at some examples so we can see this in action. Example 3. We're going to work with -8 is less than or equal to k minus 4 is less than or equal to -1. And this is what kind of graph, everyone, or what kind of equation or inequality, excuse me. Sometimes I say that interchangeably, inequality and equation. What I mean is inequality. And or. It is an and. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to get this k right here, the variable, by itself in the middle part. We need to get this -4 off of there. So we treat it like an equation. We cancel it out by adding the opposite. So we had -4, we add +4, but we have to do the same thing on all three parts. Equal treatment, just like on both sides of an equation. So that this relationship right here is the same. -8 plus 4 is -4. And then we still have our less than or equal to, and now we just have a k by itself because this went away, which is what we want, is less than or equal to +3, -1 plus 4. And now we have something that we can graph easily. It asks us to solve and graph. Example 3 and 4 are both going to be and equations or inequalities. So let's graph it. Draw your line, arrow, arrow. We're going to have -4 in one part. We're going to have 3 in the other part. And then we're going to have an open or closed circle, guys. Open or closed. Think. What do we have here and here? That's going to be a closed circle. Closed circle. And because it's an and, k is everything right in between -4 and 3, including -4 and 3. That is what k is. And we have solved it and graphed it. Example 4. We have -9. -9 is less than -5 plus k is less than or equal to -8. And this is totally legal. We can have one or both of them less than or equal to, or one or both just less than. What's our first step? Well, we have to get k by itself in the middle again. So we're going to have to get this -5 off. So let's add the opposite. But whatever we do to one part, see this middle part right here? We added 5 to it. That means we're going to have to add 5 to this part here, the first part, and the third part. Remember, I wanted you to see all 3 parts here above. Very important. You see all 3 parts. We have to do the same thing to all 3 parts. Okay. We're getting fairly sophisticated here. -9 plus 5 is -4. And then we have the less than, then we have k, and then we have less than or equal to. We did not flip the sign at all. -8 plus 5 is not +3, but -3. My bad. But this statement right here is true. -4 is less than k and is less than or equal to -3. Okay, so k is right between -3 and -4. But what is our graph going to look like? Well, you can do this, right? Draw a line, arrow, arrow. We're going to have -4 and then -3 as our two numbers. And what kind of circles are we going to have? Well, between -4 and k, we're going to have a less than there. So that is going to be an open circle. And between k and -3, we're going to have a less than or equal to. So that will be a closed circle. And k is everything right in between those two points right there.